Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the House Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities Committee to order. The purpose of this meeting is to get an overview of the Pennsylvania's Public Utility Commission. Today we will hear from Mr. Steve DeFrank, Chair of the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission. I'd ask the members to hold the questions until the conclusion of Chairman Frank's testimony. Chairman Metzger, do you have any remarks?
No, let's get on with it, please.
Mr. Frank.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Burgos, Chairman Metzger, and members of the House Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities Committee. My name is Steve DeFrank, and I have the great honor and privilege of serving as the Chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. My colleagues on the Commission include Vice Chair Kimberly Barrow and Commissioners Catherine Zerfas, John Coleman, and Ralph Yanora. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the vital work of our Commission and the dedicated professionals working there who serve Pennsylvania every day. The Pennsylvania PUC is responsible for ensuring that essential utility services remain safe, reliable, and affordable for all residents and businesses of the Commonwealth. We oversee more than 8,400 entities providing electricity, natural gas, water, wastewater, steam, telecommunications, and transportation services, as well as pipeline safety and public highway railroad crossings. Over the past year, the Commission has addressed a number of utility rate cases, strengthened consumer protections, enhanced infrastructure oversight, led efforts to expand broadband access, fortified cybersecurity, and improve energy grid reliability. We are fortunate to have some of the most experienced and respected regulatory professionals in the country working for the PUC. Our engineers, economists, attorneys, and industry specialists do not see this work as just a job, but rather they see it as a mission, a vocation, and a professional and personal commitment to public service. Whether ensuring the power lines and pipelines are safe, protecting consumers from unfair practices, resolving disputes over broadband deployment, or investigating service failures, the work our staff does matters, and not just to this Commission, but to every Pennsylvanian. Additionally, Pennsylvania plays a leading role in natural gas and regional utility regulation. It plays a leading role in national and regional utility regulation. Our PUC is widely recognized for setting best practices in consumer protection, market oversight, and infrastructure safety policies that other states and federal agencies often look to as a model. The Commission continues to focus on high-priority initiatives which reflect the evolution of this public safety and regulatory agency as we begin our 88th year of service to Pennsylvanians. Headquartered in Harrisburg, the Commission also maintains regional offices in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harmarville, and Scranton. The PUC's workforce is made up of more than 460 employees spread among 13 offices and bureaus throughout the agency. I've submitted extensive testimony summarizing many of the key functions and areas of interest to the Commission at present. In the interest of time for this hearing, I wish to highlight just some of those topics, but I welcome any questions today or follow-up the committee may have from our discussion or my submitted testimony. First, I'd like to start with a summary of the PUC filings and resource statistics staff has handled at the PUC in the last year. Driven by an ever-growing list of cases before the Commission in 2024, PUC staff handled a record-breaking volume of work with outstanding results. More than 32,000 filings were received in 2024, including an unprecedented 31 individual rate cases, along with handling over 77,000 consumer complaints. Let me share some statistics regarding our filings last year. Nearly 12,000 documents were served by the Commission's Secretary's Bureau. 675 evidentiary hearings and 75 public input hearings were conducted by the Office of Administrative Law Judge, and 282 cases were resolved through the office's mediation program. 862 orders and final orders were served, along with 417 initial and recommended decisions from our OALJ, and over 6,500 secretarial letters and other documents. Consumer inquiries and complaints also received a high degree of attention during 2024, with our Bureau of Consumer Services answering more than 112,000 calls, resolving over 74,000 customer inquiries, reducing open winter moratorium cases to the lowest level in a decade. The PUC Safety Division conducted more than 3,000 electric and pipeline safety inspections and responded to 153 electric safety investigations and 16 pipeline-related incidents. The Rail Safety Section completed over 1,270 inspections and addressed 73 reported incidents involving trains and vehicles or pedestrians. Lastly, the Motor Carrier Safety Section conducted 533 safety fitness reviews on carriers, more than 2,690 federal new entrant safety audits, and more than 3,500 roadside inspections of commercial motor vehicles. Next, I would like to discuss the consumer protection and affordability. One of the PUC's most fundamental responsibilities is ensuring that Pennsylvania's utility consumers, households, businesses, and communities have fair and reasonable access to essential services. To that end, the Commission has taken decisive action on key protections, including protecting vulnerable consumers from losing essential services, expanding access to LIHEAP data sharing, simplifying applications, and ensuring affordability programs remain effective, and engaging in community-based education initiatives to help Pennsylvanians understand their rights and available assistance programs. As the legislature considers potential updates to Chapter 14 of the Public Utility Code, the Commission stands ready to collaborate on ensuring a balanced approach that protects consumers while maintaining financial stabilities for utilities. In December 2024, the PUC took action to provide continuity and stability for consumers by adopting a statement of policy to reaffirm essential consumer safeguards. This proactive step ensured consistency concerning key protections, including winter shutoff moratoriums, structured payment arrangements, medical certification exemptions, and protections for victims of domestic violence. PUC is resolved to ensure the utility-related consumer protections are both effective and sustainable. The Commission's decision to maintain these safeguards was guided by two key priorities: preventing service disruptions for vulnerable consumers and ensuring consistency in the regulatory framework governing utility billing, collection, and dispute resolution while the General Assembly continues to deliberate updates to Chapter 14. The PUC's efforts to facilitate and deliberate consumer complaints is no small task. Consumer complaints comprise a significant portion of daily calls to the PUC. In the past year, BCS managed over 118,000 consumer contacts and over 77,000 total complaints, reflecting a slight decline from 2023. The majority of the complaint volume to BCS in 2024 were requests for payment arrangements, with just over 44,000 requests opened. In addition to addressing inbound inquiries, the Commission is dedicated to education and outreach. The PUC's consumer educators reached hundreds of frontline community partners and utility consumers through many in-person and virtual educational events, including the PUC's annual Be Utility Wise Consumer Education Conferences. The Be Utility Wise program enhances consumer understanding of critical utility issues, including affordability and assistance programs. Most recently, on March 19th, the PUC Consumer Educators led Philadelphia's annual Be Utility Wise Human Services Conference and finalized plans to hold events in Pittsburgh, Johnstown, Reading, and Harrisburg later this year. Also, as part of its ongoing statewide review of universal service programs, the PUC established the Universal Service Working Group in August 2023, bringing together utilities, consumer advocates, and other stakeholders to identify ways to enhance program coordination and reduce barriers to enrollment. The working group explored key aspects of universal service improvement, including developing a common application form that standardizes enrollment applications to simplify the enrollment process for eligible consumers, creating a universal service website, a centralized online resource to assist customers in understanding and applying for assistance programs, and preparing for LIHEAP data sharing, which facilitates the automatic enrollment of eligible low-income households in utility assistance programs using federal LIHEAP recipient data. The Commission has acted swiftly to implement several of the working group's recommendations, further improving the effectiveness of Pennsylvania's universal service programs. Next, I'd like to talk about some rate case activity of the last year. As I previously stated, the Commission has faced an unprecedented surge in rate case filings, with 31 cases filed in 2024, a dramatic increase from the typical 7 to 9 cases we would see each year. This wave of filing reflects multiple factors, including aging infrastructure requiring significant investment, rising operating costs, including fuel and labor expenses, and economic pressures such as increased interest rates. While each case presents unique challenges, the Commission has worked to reduce the financial burden on consumers by thoroughly reviewing proposed rate cases, negotiating fair settlements, and mandating improvements in service quality and consumer protections. In 2024, our staff supported 54 public input hearings on rate cases across the state. Despite the complexity and volume of cases, the PUC consistently reduced requested rate increases, ensuring fair and reasonable outcomes for consumers. These decisions also included mandates for improved service reliability and infrastructure investments to ensure safe and dependable utility service for Pennsylvania residents and businesses, enhancements to affordability programs, ensuring that low-income customers receive additional support to manage increasing utility costs, and new customer protections and operational improvements to hold utilities accountable for responsive and high-quality service. The Commission's work in 2024 reflects its ongoing commitment to balancing the financial needs of utilities with the interests of Pennsylvania's consumers, ensuring that rates remain just and reasonable while promoting reliability, affordability, and long-term sustainability in the state's utility sector. Next, I would like to highlight the topic of electric resource adequacy. The Commission is actively engaged in assessing resource adequacy and supporting the continued development of Pennsylvania's competitive electricity markets. The issue of electric resource adequacy has gained attention following the July 2024 capacity auction conducted by PJM Interconnection, the regional grid operator for Pennsylvania and much of the Mid-Atlantic region. The auction resulted in a significant increase in the capacity pricing for the 12-month period beginning June 2025. The primary reasons for these cost increases include projected electric load growth, particularly from data centers supporting artificial intelligence applications, which could account for 16% of total electricity demand by 2039, up from current 4% demand today. Increased adoption of electric vehicles and electrification in general, adding to future demand growth. The retirement of traditional generation units and the growing use of intermittent renewable energy resources, which require a balanced mix of capacity solutions to maintain reliability, and newly established auction parameters at PJM. Recognizing the potential challenges posed by these developments, the PUC hosted a technical conference on resource adequacy in November of last year. Participants included utilities, generators, consumer advocates, and other experts. Key topics discussed included whether utilities should play a more direct role in securing new generation resources, the potential use of long-term power purchase agreements to support new generation development and grid stability, the need for large load users, such as data centers, to provide their own backup generation rather than relying solely upon the grid, the role of energy storage, demand response, and energy efficiency in balancing supply and demand needs, and regulatory and policy barriers that may slow new generation and transmission development, including lags in PJM's process for interconnecting new generation resources, local permitting challenges, environmental policies, and supply chain constraints. Following the conference, the PUC received 30 formal comments and is currently reviewing input from stakeholders to determine next steps. I envision action in the near future on numerous fronts, including a potential large user tariff design, EDC load projections, time of use rate design, and energy efficiency measures. As Pennsylvania's electricity landscape continues to evolve, the PUC remains focused on ensuring resource adequacy through continued engagement with PJM, utilities, and stakeholders to address emerging grid reliability challenges. The Commission looks forward to working with the General Assembly, industry partners, and consumer advocates to ensure that Pennsylvania's electricity market remains reliable, competitive, and consumer-friendly. Next, I would like to touch on some water and wastewater issues. Water service is an essential public need, and the Commission remains committed to ensuring safe, reliable, and affordable service for all Pennsylvanians. In recent years, the Commission has taken proactive steps to enhance regulatory oversight, promote infrastructure modernization, and improve affordability for consumers. The acquisition of municipal water and wastewater systems by investor-owned utilities under Section 1329 of the Public Utility Code has been an area of growing interest across Pennsylvania. While these transactions can bring increased investment, operational expertise, and infrastructure improvements, they also require careful oversight to ensure that the public interests are protected and ratepayer impacts are fully considered. In February 2024, the PUC introduced new measures to enhance transparency, public awareness, and consistency in evaluating Section 1329 acquisition applications. These include requiring at least 2 public meetings before a sale agreement is finalized, ensuring that local residents have an opportunity to understand and provide input on proposed acquisitions before an agreement is reached. Mandatory disclosure of potential rate impacts, requiring sellers to provide formal notice to customers about how the transaction could affect their future bills. Establishing uniform evaluation guidelines, ensuring that appraisals used in the transaction process are consistent, objective, and equally weighed. And developing a reasonableness review ratio, providing a standardized measure to assess whether the proposed acquisition price aligns with fair market values of the industry sector. These changes reflect the Commission's commitment to accountability in water and wastewater acquisitions and ensure that ratepayers and local communities are fully informed when these transactions take place. In addition to overseeing municipal system acquisitions, the PUC also plays a key role in addressing failing and financially distressed water utilities through Section 529 of the Public Utility Code. Section 529 enables the Commission to require a capable utility to acquire or improve a struggling water provider, ensuring that customers receive safe and reliable service. Several ongoing Section 529 investigations highlight the Commission's commitment to protecting customers of distressed systems. These include Conneaut Lake Park Water, Rock Spring Water, and Venango Water. These cases underscore the Commission's responsibility to intervene when small water systems fail, ensuring that customers receive safe, reliable, and properly managed service. Additionally, a growing concern in Pennsylvania's water sector is the presence of per- or polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, in drinking water. These synthetic forever chemicals are commonly used in industrial applications and firefighting foam and persist in the environment, posing significant health risks. In January 2023, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection set maximum containment levels for PFOA and PFOS, requiring water utilities to implement treatment solutions. In April 2024, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency issued its final rule on PFOS limits, setting stricter federal standards that will increase compliance costs for our water utilities. Large utilities have begun installing treatment systems to address PFAS contamination, while smaller water providers may struggle due to high capital costs of filtration and remediation. PFAS remediation may be one of the factors causing an increase in 529 cases. The PUC continues to monitor the financial impact of these regulations and is working with DEP and the Small Water Task Force to assist small and mid-sized utilities in navigating compliance challenges. In closing, the PUC is dedicated to ensuring that Pennsylvania's utility services remain safe, reliable, and affordable while adapting to the evolving challenges of the modern utility regulation. As we move forward, we remain committed to protecting consumers through assistance programs and regulatory oversight, strengthening infrastructure resilience to address aging systems, extreme weather, and cybersecurity events, and fostering innovation in energy markets, broadband expansion, and competitive utility services. On behalf of my colleagues, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I welcome your questions and look forward to collaborating with the committee and the General Assembly to advance utility policies that benefit all Pennsylvanians. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Franks. At this time, we'll take questions from Representative Isaacson.
Good morning. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you touched on briefly in your comments about Chapter 14 And I would like you to take the liberty to explain Chapter 14 a little bit. We have many new members on this committee.
Sure.
But also, since we did not meet the renewal at the end of last term, could you explain a little bit about what you want going forward with that, and what are you doing with regard to your oversight, since we did not get to the renewal process? Thank you.
So a brief background, Chapter 14 originated in 2004. It began when the PUC had oversight of PGW. So PGW fell under the PUC's jurisdiction. Philadelphia Gas Works, yes, fell under the PUC's jurisdiction in, I think it was 2001. And being a municipal entity, they are a cash flow utility, which most of the utilities we regulate are investor-owned, meaning they're stockholders behind the utility. PGW, Philadelphia Gas Works, is a municipally owned utility that they have no stockholders behind them. It's the residents of Philadelphia, it's their customers. So they were having issues, they were having cash flow issues because people weren't paying bills from November 1st to March 31st during the winter moratorium, because it applied to everyone regardless of income. So the General Assembly passed Chapter 14, which set an income parameters for protection of the winter moratorium. So if you made a certain percentage or above, you could still be terminated during the winter months. That was something new in Pennsylvania, and they did a 10-year sunset on it. It was renewed in 2014, and it expired again in 2024. As you are aware, the General Assembly did not reauthorize it last year, so it is expired. We did do a legal analysis, a legal review of what we can do in the interim. Chapter 14 limits the rights of the PUC. It does not grant the PUC rights. In fact, some of the payment arrangement language in Chapter 14 is limiting some of the payment arrangements that the PUC had done previously. So Chapter 14 does limit the rights of the PUC. So what we did in December of 2024 was we passed an order which basically set the table as it is since 2014. So we made no changes to the program at all, awaiting for the General Assembly to either reauthorize it or decide not to reauthorize it. We're probably going to go like this for a little while. If it appears that the General Assembly is not going to reauthorize it, then we'll probably come back, talk to our oversight committees. If we did do something permanently, it would be through the rulemaking process, so both oversight committees would have opportunity to have input at that time.
Okay, thank you. And if we do take that up, certainly we'd like you to make sure that you're part of the conversation and communicate your thoughts on what we do in the reauthorization. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman DeFrank, thank you for your testimony as always, and I want to thank you and your staff for helping out in our district, the 106. You have been responsive, and your staff has been great to deal with on issues that are important to the constituents of the 106 district, so thank you for that. We have something coming on in Pennsylvania that I don't think we've seen before, and a demand on our grid is going to come quickly. It has to do with data centers. I think you know the 6th District is fortunate enough to bring back the Crane Clean Energy Center. That was done on a power purchasing agreement, and we're seeing in front of the meter and behind the meter, if we go to the Susquehanna plant and Amazon and what they've done up there with their data center. So my question to you is the PUC, and what is your role as far as making sure with all this demand coming online, and then it's basically going into our baseload power plants, our nuclear power plants. They're looking for that, which of course they want as far as data centers. How do we, and what do you plan on doing as far as going forward to make sure that we have that baseload power for our residents, and then also making sure that we're able to balance this as far as how many megawatts are going to come off the system and go to these data centers?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for the comments. So in Pennsylvania, we're a restructured state, so that means generation is a private market, or, is a retail market, and what we regulate at the PUC is the distribution of power. But what we still require is safe and reliable service. So that was the grounds that we used to hold our tech conference in November, because we don't have direct regulatory oversight of generation in Pennsylvania. We can't tell PPL, hey, you're low on power, go build a generator. They're not allowed to own generation. So, but they are required for the delivery of safe and reliable electricity. So our question to PPL and every other EDC in the state is, if there's a shortfall in electricity, where are you getting electricity to serve your customers that you're required to do by law, that we have the oversight to require you to do? So that's the hook we have in terms of, sort of around the side there, because we don't have direct regulatory oversight of generation. Data centers create a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity. We are never going to have a load growth opportunity in our lifetimes like this. This is generational setting. In addition to that, it's also the whole AI race and the control of information. I think we would like that here in this country as opposed to that developing in other countries. So how do we manage that load? I mean, to give you an example, one of our EDCs is expecting over 100% load growth in the next 5 years. It's a 7 gigawatt system now looking to go to 16 gigawatts in 5 years. How do we manage that? First off, I think that we should try to incentivize being in front of the meter as much as possible. As more load that is in front of the meter, all ratepayers benefit from that because it'll drive rates down. A rate is nothing more than a cost per unit. So if we limit our costs but increase the number of units, the cost per unit goes down. So all ratepayers benefit if a data center goes in front of the meter. As you pointed out in Susquehanna, that's a mixture of both. It's part of it's in front of the meter, part of it's behind the meter. For installations behind the meter, that is PJM and FERC jurisdiction. We have no jurisdiction over that. We are working to at least try to get some information so we at least know when these installations are coming in, so then we can follow up, make sure PJM has the proper load forecast. One of the other things that we gathered out of our Resource Adequacy Tech Conference was our need for resource planning. This is something, there's 6 states that are restructured in the PJM footprint. Every restructured state is having the same issue. In the mid-90s when we restructured, we handed everything over to PJM. And we said, we're relying on you solely for your load projections. We have no personnel at the PUC that's done that because we haven't done it in over 30 years. So we need to start to rebuild that expertise internally because what PJM's load projections are, we might have a different load for. We might have a difference of opinion. This is all driven. PJM did a 4R report, and they predict a 30 to 40 gigawatt shortfall in the PJM footprint by 2030. And that's from retiring units and reduced supply coupled with increased demand. Is that number right? Are we going to be 30 to 40 gigawatts short? We don't know. I mean, we are solely relying upon PJM for this. So pretty much every other restructured state in PJM footprint is starting to do what we're doing and starting to take a closer look at those load projections to see what exactly the cliff is that we're going to be facing. Secondly, I get asked a lot, should we put a brakes on data center development? I personally don't think so, because one of the things I pointed out when I was talking to the governor about this is that, technology advances so quickly. Look at the phone in your pocket and the storage that your phone has today compared to just 5 or 10 years ago. It's completely different. I think 2030 and the energy used by data centers is going to look much different than it does in 2025. Quantum computing is only going to become more energy efficient. It's not going to become less energy efficient, right? So the usage per unit's only going to get better. So when we talk about the kind of development that we're talking, I mean, these are $10, $15 billion developments. I would hate to see us say no to that, to watch that development go to another state when we're sending our electrons to that other state to service it anyways. Why wouldn't we want to bring that development here in the Commonwealth and those jobs here in the Commonwealth? So I think, again, it's a great opportunity. Additionally, we are active with PJM. We are active with FERC, an organization called OPSI. It's an organization PJM states. Every state utility commissioner in the PJM footprint is a member of it. Each state has one board member. I'm the Pennsylvania board member. And with that position, it gives us access to the PJM board frequently. So we are constantly talking to them, constantly giving input in things they can do. One of the things I will point out is one of the proposals that I've advocated for a long time in OPSI, and that is, part of the issue is the PJM queue and projects not getting through the queue quick enough. I'm sure you've all heard about the PJM queue and how projects sort of languish there. One of the things, so when I went on OPSI in 2023, it just dawned on me that the queue treats every project like it's a greenfield project. We're having a number of retired coal plants in Pennsylvania occurring that want to transition to natural gas, but they go to the back of the line. The queue is for interconnection. So if you already have interconnection established at locations, why are we treating it like it's a greenfield project? PJM did propose an RRI, I'm not sure what the initials stand for, but it's sort of a separate queue for shovel-ready projects. They had their first application period, so they just got approved, I think, late last year, early this year by FERC, had their first application period. They already have 25 gigawatts of applications in. And these are old plants. A lot of these are old plants that are transitioning to gas or things like that. So that 40 to 30 gigawatt figure, while it seems daunting, I don't want to create panic, because I do believe that we will be able to meet those needs. And again, I believe this is one of the greatest opportunities we're going to have in our lifetime.
Chairman DeFrank, I want to thank you for that. That was above and beyond what I thought you were going to answer, to be honest with you. But your honesty is great. I think what comes out of this, and what I encourage this committee to do, is have a hearing with PJM also, so we can follow through on what is going on and what our demands are going to be. Because, I mean, I think everybody knows that I've probably studied the nuclear power industry more than most, and when it comes down to what is out there and what our baseload power is, because if we're losing coal plants, we're losing baseload power, and we have to replace that. There is no other way around this. And 15 other states right now are active, and I mean extremely active, in passing legislation for nuclear power and how we're going to handle, how they're going to handle baseload power. And we sit here and we do nothing. You know what I mean? I'm for all energy generation. I don't care what it is, but we must put it on the grid, and we must continue to put more plants in place and use new innovative ideas and incentivize them to come to Pennsylvania, or we are going to lose that opportunity with these data centers and AI in the very near future, because the competitiveness of other states is going to get great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this hearing, too. I think it's very important, Chairman DeFrank, that we have a policy discussion in front of everybody as we're heading into budget season and at the beginning of a session also, because it helps us prioritize our initiatives and make sure that they're in sync with yours. So again, thank you for being here. I'd like to take one step backwards and very quickly discuss procedurally Chapter 14, where we stand, and the activity that we as a General Assembly need to take. As the session came to an end last year before your, I guess, interim rulemaking with regard to extending Chapter 14 protections, this. We were presented by leadership of this committee an opinion letter that came from the PUC, I think over your signature, that said that the PUC didn't believe that legally it required reauthorization to extend Chapter 14. I read that letter. I didn't read it to say that, and I'm not hearing you saying that today in testimony. Do you believe that you need that enabling legislation from us to reauthorize Chapter 14? And then I have a follow-up question.
Well, sure. I mean, we can do a rulemaking, but we can't do Chapter 14. That's a legislative authorization. I think the purpose of that letter you're referring to was to say that the world doesn't end on December 31st or January 1st at 12 o'clock. That you know, that we wanted to still keep a playing field, if you will. I mean, every utility spent the last 10 years implementing programs. We didn't want to just upend it like that, and then the General Assembly reauthorize it 3 months later. It's clearly your decision, but, if we have a Chapter 14, it's got to be done by the legislature.
Right, and as a fundamental principle of administrative law, you can't engage in rulemaking unless there's enabling legislation from the General Assembly, which means, to my mind, while you have a patchwork order now to bridge the gap, if you will, between the expiration of Chapter 14 last year and the reauthorization from the General Assembly and passage by the governor, it is no more than that. In other words, you could not engage in rulemaking to make a final rule without further enabling legislation from us.
So I'm not sure I would agree with you on that one. I think that...
So you think you have the authority to make rules without the General Assembly passing a law first?
No, I think that there's sections of the code and that letter, and I'm happy to meet with you and go over that point by point, but that letter cited a number of sections under the code that, gives us ability to do a payment arrangement. That gives us the ability to do, I'm not sure if we can do med search, but I think there are certain things we can do under those sections. And like I said, I'm happy to meet with you offline and go through that, because it's pretty cumbersome, it's pretty complicated. I'm not a lawyer, so I would like to have counsel, and I know you are.
And I am.
And I know you are.
So the point being, and I don't mean to take you under cross, that's not my purpose. My purpose here is we are having a debate. I'm not intending to have one with you now. We are having a debate about whether or not it needs to be reauthorized, and I agree with you that there are portions of the code dealing with payment arrangements and conditions to low-income customers that do not involve Chapter 14, but we're talking about terminations, right? And you can't engage in rulemaking on that subject without further legislation from us authorizing that. And to that point, is the PUC aware that right now the overwhelming majority and maybe I should say this as a predicate, the issue of terminations is about recovery of uncollectible debt. And by and large, we, as a ratepayer base, are paying for any uncollectible debt that the utility cannot recover. I don't think any of us object to the subsidy amongst the rest of us who are paying our bills for low-income people to keep their electricity on. What we're unwilling to pay for, and what will become the biggest debate in Chapter 14, are the people who are gaming the system, who are using this patchwork order of yours to avoid paying their bills and to do it in a cyclical way to the tune of thousands of people who are then getting their bills paid for by other ratepayers who are paying their bills. Are you aware of that issue, and does your order cover that?
So I'm not aware of that issue. I mean, we have seen uncollectibles increase, and this is something that's been happening for years. I mean, when we reauthorized Chapter 14 in 2014, I was working as Senate staff at the time, and that was when we did the requirement for utilities to report balances over 10,000, because we were seeing some of those, and we didn't see those prior to that. As a commissioner, I've seen balances 25, 30,000. And, the reality is, what's the chances of that getting paid? And that's a balance that's likely going to be spread across the whole rate base. Right. I would also agree with you on the termination side, that I don't know that we can sit there and establish income guidelines like Chapter 14 does. That would clearly need to be a legislative authorization.
I thank you for that. I'd like to turn to the issue of resource
Chairman,
adequacy.
in the sake of time, we have other members that would like to ask questions, if you don't mind.
If I can get through this very quickly, and I'll make
All
it
right,
faster.
thank you.
On resource adequacy, and I heard you say that you engaged in I guess, a public comment period from which you got 30 formal comments, and what I heard you say is you envision action, but as you stated, you don't have authority over the generation marketplace because that is unregulated in Pennsylvania. And so the question now becomes, are we about to allow utilities back in the generation business? And again, I intend this as an open question, not one on hostile cross. If you do envision utilities getting back in the generation business to address resource adequacy, what are going to be the limits on that?
So the limits would be what the General Assembly tells us.
Meaning, again, you need enabling legislation.
Yeah, there's no question that we would need enabling legislation. It was the conversation I had with both chairs when we met. And, I get asked that a lot, should we re-regulate or not? And my standard answer is, it depends what problem you're trying to solve.
Right, and the piece of your testimony that got my attention is that you envision action, but you can't take action without us.
No. The kind of action we're talking about is a large user tariff, for instance. I think we might start a proceeding. We don't have a model tariff. If we're trying to encourage large users to be in front of the meter, let's make it easier for them to do that. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Things that we may be able to do without legislation if we leverage, and I personally think we are going to need changes to Act 129 on the procurement side because that requires for low cost default service. But one of the options in terms of not allowing utilities to own generation, but allowing them to maybe do power purchase agreements and start to use some of the bulk purchasing power of default service customers to incite generation build. I think that's been thrown around as well. But again, we would have to need legislative authorization, in my opinion, on the procurement side of Act 129.
And in the interest of time, I'll just make this as a comment and then pass the microphone along. I'm going to be working on legislation involving the foreign land investment of properties around generation sites, both for security reasons and for property reasons. I sit on the Electric Supply Task Force of the National Conference of State Legislatures, and that's becoming an emerging issue, especially around nuclear power and other large generating sites where foreign countries want to build data centers in our country in the place that has basically in front of the meter and behind the meter power that is both reliable and cheap. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, good to see you
Good to see you.
I find it troubling, remarkable, maybe darkly ironic that we're having a hearing today talking about the need for more energy demand when just last week we had a situation in Homer City where the demolition started on a coal-fired plant. The stacks went down. And of course, the reason that plant shut down was because of in my estimation, poor energy policy decisions made by the last administration and the current administration. My question to you is, as it relates to these carbon tax schemes, whether it's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative or others, what does that do to generators, to utilities, as it relates to producing affordable and reliable energy to our consumers?
So this is also a question I get asked a lot, and my answer is that, what is it doing for the cost of those units or anything, if that's the question? I don't think anything. I think that all of that is speculative. It may impact a company's decision where to locate, granted, but in terms of actual cost on real dollars on ratepayers today, in terms of the market, I don't believe it has a bearing because it's not in effect.
Because it's not in effect, but when it does go into effect, what will the cost be?
I have no idea. I think that there are groups trying to get an idea of that, and this came out in our budget hearing in the House a couple weeks ago. It was referenced a letter that came to me from Senator Yaw, where the Senate Republicans were looking at a modeling. They contacted us in IFO.
Well, let me ask you this. How would it be that incorporating a carbon tax wouldn't raise rates?
I think it depends on the offsets. And I'm sorry, I don't know much about the press program or Reggie in terms of how those credits work, but I would think that, someone that's advocating for that would say it's the savings of the credits. You're paying it, part of it, but you're also getting money back. And I have no idea what that break-even point would be, and that's what I think his study would show. So the IFO, they let Senate Republicans know they would need modeling software, and I think they're talking about whether they want to make that investment or not.
Well, other states have gone into these types of programs. You have a similar program in California, although it's certainly different, but there's other states that are in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Why is energy more expensive in those states than it is here?
Well, I think that it's all done by the PJM footprint, so I don't know that it's a state-specific thing. As I said, when we talk about data centers, we can't control where electrons go. We are a net exporter. We are the largest exporter in PJM, but it's not like we can stop something from going into another state. So I think that when you look at California, for instance, they don't have an RTO. They're off by themselves. What that does to cost, I think that would probably have some impact in some of the costs they're paying because of that, whereas we are in a regional RTO, which is much different.
Yeah,
if you look at Texas, California, they're all standalones.
So I am excited about the potential of artificial intelligence and data centers. I am concerned that our energy policy, lack thereof, confused, whatever it is. Maybe it's just the uncertainty of it that's driving this. I'm certain as well, though, that it's going to raise costs for consumers. I feel like we are going to miss the boat on that, and I would say we've missed the boat on a lot of manufacturing opportunities that went to other states because of our poor energy policy. So thank you. I appreciate you being here, and looking forward to having more conversations with you.
Thank you, Representative. Great seeing you.
Representative Borowski.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman DeFrank, for being here, and thank you for your testimony. I just want to shift it back, I think, specifically to the ratepayers. I had the opportunity this past year to attend two PUC hearings when you were down in the southeast part of the state around rate increases requested by some of the utilities down there. And so you stated in your testimony that certainly the PUC is responsible for ensuring essential utility service that remains safe, reliable, and affordable for residents and businesses. So my question to you, and I thank you for the outline around the rate cases and how you reach decisions, but my question is, do you consider, so in the case of just recently down in the southeast, we had multiple ratepayers coming in, and we had these rate cases. Do you consider that as part of your decision-making process? So if there is more than one requesting an increase at the same time, does that factor into your decision-making process?
So, as you know, we sit as judges, so I'm just going to answer it how I look at cases. My colleagues may look at them differently. I look at cases individually. It's not lost upon me that the natural gas ratepayer is also the electric ratepayer, is also the water ratepayer. As I said, we had 31 rate cases last year. A busy year for us would have been 8 to 10. Do I think we're going to have 31 rate cases every year? No. But I think it was sort of a perfect storm. When you look at sectors, they tend to be pretty cyclical. Water comes in the most frequently, followed by, probably natural gas and electric. I think all those cycles sort of lined up together, coupled with termination prohibition from the pandemic, coupled with increased supply costs, coupled with increased interest costs. I think it was a perfect storm that led to 31 rate cases. So of those 31 rate cases, 51 counties of our 67 had service territories where residents of those counties had 2 or more increases. So that's not lost upon us. But when I'm judging that individual rate case, I can't sit there and say that, oh, this person may have increase over here or there. I do judge it as the individual case. That being said, affordability does come top of mind. You know, we have a very robust consumer assistance program in the Commonwealth. In fact, we lead a lot of states in our consumer assistance programs. A lot of states look at us as a model for some of these programs. That's one of the things our Universal Service Work Group did. Is one of the things when I came in, we did a motion to create that work group to ease applications, incoming applications. Each customer assistance program has their own application. And, you know, I've been around here a long time. I worked in the Senate a long time. And one of the innovative things here was when Governor Ridge came in and we created a single application for economic development assistance at DCD. Prior to that, all of those economic development programs had individual applications. Now you fill out one application and the department puts it to whatever program it goes for. That's what we hope to get here in Pennsylvania for customer assistance programs, to maximize the meeting the need with the person, with the dollars with the person that meets the need or has the need. Again, affordability is paramount and first of mind as we're seeing these costs continue to increase, and we're seeing that affordability go higher up the economic ladder.
Are you finding it difficult to reconcile between the increases and the need for infrastructure? So I was a commissioner in my township, and we worked closely with our local utilities, and we know that our infrastructure was, desperately in need of assistance. So do you find it difficult?
I do. I mean, that's the balance that every regulator has, is balancing affordability. You know, in a perfect world, we would just replace all aging infrastructure and you wouldn't be able, I see Representative Williams sitting there because he's worked in that sector before, you wouldn't be able to afford a bill. So, in a perfect world, we just replace everything, but we couldn't afford the service. So how do we prioritize that replacement while still keeping the cost of the service affordable for most of our customers here? And that's a challenge, and it's becoming tougher every day as, affordability becomes a bigger issue. And one other thing, Representative, you did ask if public input hearings matter. I think if you look at our comments, it shows that they do. Pretty much every rate case that I've made a comment on, I've pulled some quotes or some assertions made by customers. In fact, public input hearings in Scranton led to a customer service, quality of service investigation for the utility there. So please tell your constituents, we certainly do listen to them.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I will let them know. We spent a lot of time providing some guidance. Right. I'll have to say, when I attended my first PUC meeting, I had no idea that that's what it was. I mean, it's a quasi-judicial proceeding. Right. I don't think people had any understanding. I know I didn't. So I certainly learned a lot, and we worked closely with the consumer advocate who helped provide information and guidance to our communities when they were going to testify. So I thank you for that, and yes, it is a process.
Thank you.
Chairman Metzger.
Chairman, I liked your analogy that you had earlier about the phone and how the sophistication of the phone changes so dramatically over time. And one of the things that we do in the legislature, in my experience, is that we occasionally recognize that technology changes quickly. And we also sometimes are unsure if the policies that we make will sustain the test of time. And so that's why we use the legislative tool of sunsetting to make the policy go away. And then we revisit that policy. That gives us that opportunity to revisit it. So with Chapter 14, we have a policy in Pennsylvania that's essentially one of the largest welfare programs in the state. We are using the ratepayers' money to subsidize those who don't pay. And the legislature failed to act and chose to not reauthorize that program. The PUC, as you said, has asked its own lawyers to come up with a policy that allows that program to continue without any legislative authorization. I'm struggling to determine where the line would be where we would, I guess maybe the question is, what would we have to do as a legislature to make you stop?
So I think at some point, we would have to undertake a rulemaking. That would be coming before this committee, so I think that's one step. But let me go back to some of the points about that. I've heard this program referred to as a welfare program. I'm just curious as to how it's a welfare program, because...
Chairman, I'm going to interrupt you, and I apologize. I'm going to take some liberties here as a co-chair of the committee, but I'm simply asking you, it's my characterization.
Oh, okay.
You need not argue with me, but I'm asking you how you can continue doing this without our authorization, and if we extrapolate that a bit further, if we would say implement a fee on EDCs, and then it would sunset, would you continue collecting that fee on EDCs? Where does it end? This to me is
That's a good example, collecting a fee. We did, so there is precedent of PUC continuing to collect a fee after sunset, and that was for Chapter 30.
And does it not all invite litigation?
Well, I think that, so in the case of Chapter 30, I think the legislature reauthorized it 3 or 6 months later. I think that, me as a leader of that agency, you guys break for summer, I think then we have to have a conversation of what we do. If anything, as I said, if we as the PUC wanted to keep a program going, I think Representative Williams is absolutely correct that we couldn't limit terminations. When you let Chapter 14 expire, what you're going to allow is millionaires not to pay a utility bill during the winter moratorium. That's how we have Chapter 14. That's why we have it. You had millionaires in Philadelphia that never paid a gas bill from November to March. And PGW couldn't make payroll. I mean, that's what the issue was. They couldn't pay their employees because no one paid a gas bill. So that's how the issue came up. So really, when we're talking about it, we're talking about winter moratoriums. If Chapter 14 goes away, I think that's likely what you're going to have again is, you're going to have utility customers that are savvy that are just going to stop paying bills because we wouldn't be able to terminate them. So I think he's absolutely correct. There are parts of the Chapter 14 that we are not going to be able to do in rulemaking. You would have to do it. You would have to give us you'd have to give us legislative authorization to do it. Under the current law, I don't think we can, again, affect moratoriums. I think we could do payment arrangements, and I think the way payment arrangements came in was they did, a 30-year payment arrangement or something like that, and that's how payment arrangements actually got into Chapter 14, was to curtail what the PUC was doing, not to give it power. And Chairman, I'd love to have this conversation more with you and go over that, but just so you know, before we did do that action, we did meet with the oversight chairs as well as leadership here. I worked in the General Assembly 25 years. I'm not going to step on people's toes here. I understand legislative authorization. I believe in it. And we didn't want to just upend the program, though, at 12:01 on January 1st. I don't think anyone wanted that.
Chairman DeFrank, thank you for your comments today. As we move forward, it's people in Fayette County, in my county in Philadelphia, up in Sullivan County, Bedford County, that are basically paying the load for utilities across our state. And as we continue to work together, I hope we can find common ground on alternative energies, not just nuclear, but also clean energy that would help us reduce the cost on our consumers, particularly in Philadelphia County, where I know my community needs help. Thank you. Call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.